Mom, starting tomorrow, these are your new responsibilities in this house. Renata's words echoed in my head as I read the paper she had just handed me. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a request. It was an order. My own daughter, in my own home, was giving me a work schedule, as if I were a newly hired domestic worker. "If you don't agree," she continued, her voice cold, a tone she'd perfected over the past few months, "you can pack your things and leave. This house needs someone who actually helps, not someone who just takes up space." My hands trembled as I read the list. 6 a.m., wake up and prepare breakfasts. 7, get the kids dressed and take them to school. 8, return and start the general house cleaning. 9, wash and hang the laundry. 10, prepare lunch. The list continued, hour by hour, until 11 at night, when according to this document, I should be ironing clothes for the next day. "And, obviously," Gustavo added from the couch, without even looking up from his phone, "all this includes paying for the house expenses. That's what your pension is for." No. I stood there, in the middle of my own living room, the same living room where I had welcomed Renata when she was born 34 years ago, where I had celebrated her birthdays, where I had comforted her when she cried over her first heartbreaks. Now that same child looked at me with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "You don't have much time to decide, Mom," she said, painting her nails a bright pink. "Gustavo has already spoken with a lawyer. Since we've been living here for over 2 years and maintaining the house, we have rights. So you can be our employee and stay, or you can leave, and we'll stay anyway." The threat was clear. In my own house, with the deed in my name, my daughter was blackmailing me. Either I became her personal servant, paying all expenses and working tirelessly, or I'd be kicked out so they could take everything. "Think it over," Renata continued, blowing on her freshly painted nails. "At your age, where else are you going to find a place to live on a $600 pension? At least here you have a roof and food, and you can see your grandkids every day, unless, of course, you prefer to live alone in some miserable little room." Gustavo let out a cruel laugh. "Besides, honey, let's be realistic. What else are you going to do with your life? At least this way you'll feel useful. It's better than watching TV all day like old ladies your age do." My grandchildren were on the floor, playing with their tablets, completely oblivious to the conversation that was shattering my world. 8-year-old Ethan looked up at me for a moment and asked, "Grandma, are you going to make snacks? I'm hungry." It was the cruelest normality. To them, I was already the housekeeper, the person who fixes things, cleans, cooks, serves, not the grandma who loved them, not the woman who had worked 40 years to buy this house. I was just the free servant who was always available. "Look, Mom." Renata stood up and walked towards me, placing a condescending hand on my shoulder. "It's not that we don't love you. We love you very much. That's why we're giving you the opportunity to stay. But things have to change. This house needs order, and someone has to be responsible for keeping everything running." "And why does that someone have to be me?" I managed to whisper, finding my voice for the first time in this nightmarish conversation. "Because you're the one who doesn't work," Gustavo replied without looking up. "We work, we study, we have real responsibilities. You just collect your pension and don't do anything productive." I felt as if I had been slapped. 40 years working as a secretary in a government office. 40 years getting up at 5 in the morning, taking 2 buses to get to work, saving every penny to buy this house. 40 years raising Renata alone after her father abandoned us when she was just 3 years old. "Don't do anything productive?" I repeated, feeling the words choke me. "All these years maintaining this house, paying the bills, buying your food, taking care of your children while you go out, washing your clothes, cleaning up your messes." "That's not work, Mom," Renata interrupted me with that condescending smile I had learned to hate. "That's what anyone living in a house does. The difference is that now it's going to be organized with fixed schedules, so everything runs smoother." I looked around my living room. The furniture I had bought with so much sacrifice was ruined. The leather sofa, which had taken me 2 years to pay off, had food stains and tears from when the kids jumped on it without anyone correcting them. The wooden coffee table, which had been my pride, was covered in marks from glasses and hot plates that no one bothered to put on coasters. On the walls, my family photos had been replaced by movie posters Gustavo liked. My book collection had been relegated to a box in the garage to make space for the video games and electronic gadgets they constantly bought with the money I gave them. Besides, Renata continued, examining her nails with satisfaction, this is going to be good for you. It's going to give you purpose. Lately, you've seemed very depressed, very bored. Having clear responsibilities will help you feel better about yourself. The manipulation was so evident, it physically hurt. She was selling me my own slavery as if it were a favor they were doing me, as if becoming their free servant was a form of therapy for my emotional well-being. And you have to work on weekends, too, Gustavo added, finally looking up from his phone. Saturdays are for deep house cleaning, and Sundays are for preparing the week's meals. It's not that we're being cruel to you, honey. It's just that we need things to run like a real home. Like a real home? I repeated, feeling anger begin to replace the shock. This isn't a real home. This is the house I bought, that I maintained, where I welcomed you when you had nowhere to live. Yes, but now we're a family, Renata replied with that twisted logic that left me speechless. And in a family, everyone has their role. Ours is to work and earn income. Yours is to keep the house running. It's fair. Valerie, my 6-year-old granddaughter, approached and tugged at my skirt. Grandma, can I have cookies? The ones on top of the fridge. I looked at her and saw in her eyes the same expectation I had seen in her mother's eyes when she was her age. The expectation that Grandma always says yes, always fixes things, always available. But now that expectation came with an official schedule, an unsigned contract, an implicit threat. In a moment, my love, I told her, caressing her head. No, Renata interrupted sharply. Valerie, your grandma is going to follow a new schedule. If you want something, you have to ask her at the right time. It's 4 p.m. now, and according to the schedule, this is her snack prep time anyway. I walked to the kitchen with trembling legs, feeling as if each step led me deeper into an abyss from which I didn't know if I could escape. The schedule remained in my hand, crumpled by the pressure of my fingers. It was like holding my own emotional death sentence. When I opened the pantry, I realized how empty it was. 3 broken cookies at the bottom of a package, an expired can of tuna, and half a bag of rice. In the refrigerator, the situation wasn't much better. 2 yogurts Renata had bought for herself, 1 of Gustavo's beers, and the leftovers from 3-day-old dinner that no one else had wanted to eat. Grandma, there are no cookies, Valerie shouted from the living room with that impatience she had learned from her mother. I'm coming, my love, I replied, knowing perfectly well that I would have to improvise with what little there was, or rather, with what little they had left me to have in my own kitchen. I heard Renata's footsteps approaching. Her heels echoed with an authority they hadn't had in this house before. It was as if the simple act of having handed me that paper had transformed her into the official owner of everything. Mom, while you're in the kitchen, I wanted to remind you that you need to go to the supermarket early tomorrow. I made a list of everything we need, she said, sticking a paper on the refrigerator door. It's about $150 worth of groceries. Oh, and you also need to stop by the pharmacy to pick up the kids' vitamins and Gustavo's special shampoo. $150, a quarter of my monthly pension for a week's worth of groceries, for a family that had decided my money was theirs, by right. Renata, my pension doesn't stretch that far every week, I managed to say, though my voice sounded strangely small in my own kitchen. Oh, Mom, always the same, she sighed dramatically. You know Gustavo is saving to buy us our own house. We can't be spending our income on food and basic necessities. Besides, you eat here every day. It's normal for you to contribute to the expenses. The logic was so twisted it made me dizzy. Gustavo was saving for his own house while living rent-free in mine. He ate my food and used my services. And I, the real owner of the property, had to pay for the privilege of being their free domestic worker. And what if I don't have enough money? I asked, though I already knew what her answer would be. Then you'll have to adjust and buy the basics first. The children need to eat well. Mom, you can't be selfish with money when there are little ones in the house. Selfish with my own money, in my own house. The word stabbed me like a dagger in the chest. Gustavo appeared at the kitchen entrance, stretching as if he had just woken from a nap. It was 4:30 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, and he was in his pajamas watching television while I took care of everything else. "Honey, could you prepare something good for dinner? It was a tough day at work today," he said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a beer as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "A tough day?" I couldn't help but ask. "I thought you hadn't left all morning." "I work from home on Tuesdays," he replied with a tone that made it clear I had no right to question his schedule. "Virtual meetings, important calls. It's very stressful. That's why I need to relax when I'm done." I looked at the clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. If he had worked from home, his workday had lasted exactly 3 hours, considering I had seen him sleeping on the couch at 1 in the afternoon. "Besides," he continued, taking a long swig of his beer, "Renata and I were talking about some additional rules to make the house run smoother. For example, we need you to respect our downtime. When we're in the living room watching television, it would be better if you didn't interrupt with cleaning or cooking noises." "But the schedule says I have to cook at this time," I replied, holding up the paper still in my hand. "Yes, but without making noise. Or you can cook earlier when we're not resting. It's a matter of better organization." The contradiction was absurd. I had to cook at fixed times, but without disturbing their rest periods, which apparently covered most of the day. I had to follow strict rules that changed at their convenience. Renata returned to the kitchen with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was that smile she had perfected since adolescence, the one she used when she wanted something or when she was about to say something particularly hurtful, disguised as concern. "Mom, I also wanted to talk to you about your room," she said, leaning against the counter as if she owned the place. "Gustavo and I think it would be better if you moved to the small room in the back. We need the master bedroom because it's bigger, and we have more things." The master bedroom. My master bedroom. The room where I had slept for 30 years, where I had cried after my husband's death, where I had dreamed of watching my grandchildren grow up in a loving environment. Now they wanted to relegate me to the tiny service room, literally. "That room is very small, Renata," I said, feeling my voice crack. "There's barely enough room for a twin bed." "It's perfect for you, Mom. You don't need much space anyway. And that way we can have a bigger closet for our clothes and the kids' stuff. It's more practical for everyone." More practical for everyone. That was the mantra that justified every humiliation, every loss of dignity, every step towards my conversion into a shadow in my own life. "Besides," Gustavo added, "the small room is closer to the kitchen. It'll be easier for you to get up early to prepare breakfast without disturbing anyone." Of course, my new location in the house had been calculated to maximize my usefulness as a domestic worker, close to the kitchen to serve better, far from the main living areas, so as not to bother the true inhabitants of the house. "And when do I have to move?" I asked, though I already knew I had no real choice. "This weekend would be perfect," Renata replied cheerfully, as if we were planning a vacation. "Gustavo can help you move the heavy things. Well, the few things you need to take. Most of the furniture in the master bedroom we're going to use ourselves. The furniture I had bought, the solid wood dresser, which had been my first purchase when I got my first job, the vanity with a mirror where I had gotten ready for my wedding, the marital bed where I had conceived Renata, all of that would now be theirs because it was more practical." Ethan ran into the kitchen with his tablet in his hands and an urgent expression. "Grandma, my battery died and I need the charger. Where is it?" "In my room, honey. Go get it," I said automatically. "No," Renata intervened firmly. "Ethan, you can't go into your grandma's room without permission. She'll bring you the charger when she finishes preparing snack." The humiliation was complete. Now, not even my grandson could freely enter my room, but Renata and Gustavo could decide when and how I should move, what furniture I could keep, and which room I was allowed to live in. "And one more thing, Mom," Renata continued, as if it were an endless list of new restrictions. Sundays are our family day. Gustavo and I want to spend quality time with the kids, so it would be better if you plan to go out on those days. You can go to the park, visit a friend, whatever you want. We just need space to be a family. Sundays. My family day, too. The day I had reserved for years to do special activities with my grandchildren. To cook together, to watch movies cuddled on the couch. Now it was the day I became an intruder in my own home. "And where am I supposed to go every Sunday?" I asked, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "I don't know, Mom. You surely have friends. You can go for a walk, go to church. There are many things a person your age can do. The important thing is that you have your own activities, that you don't depend so much on us for entertainment." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling that would soon no longer be mine, thinking about how I had reached this point. At what moment had I stopped being the mother and become the servant? When had I lost the right to have an opinion in my own home? I remembered when Renata arrived with Gustavo and the children. 2 years ago, they had lost their apartment because Gustavo had lost his previous job. They arrived with tears in their eyes, hugging me and promising it would only be for a few months while they recovered financially. "You're our salvation, Mom," Renata had told me that first night. "I don't know what we'd do without you. You're the best mother in the world." The first few weeks had been almost pleasant. It was wonderful to have the house full of life again, to hear the children's laughter running through the hallways that had been silent since my husband died. Renata helped me with the cooking. Gustavo helped with some minor repairs, and the little ones filled my heart with their spontaneous hugs. But gradually, so slowly that I didn't realize it until it was too late, things began to change. First, it was Renata asking me to watch the children while she went job hunting. Then it was Gustavo expecting me to prepare dinner because he was too tired from his job interviews. Afterward, it became natural for me to pay for groceries because, after all, we all eat here. Every favor I did became an expectation. Every gesture of love transformed into an obligation. Every time I said, "no problem" to a request, I was signing my own emotional servitude. At 3 in the morning, I heard noises in the kitchen. I quietly got up and walked down the hallway, finding Gustavo serving himself cereal directly from the box, leaving crumbs all over the countertop that I had cleaned before going to bed. "Gustavo, is everything okay?" I whispered, so as not to wake the children. He looked at me startled, as if he had been caught doing something wrong. "Yes, I was just hungry. It's nothing. But tomorrow there will be cereal in the bowl for the children," I said, seeing that the box was almost empty. "Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. It's just cereal. You can buy more tomorrow," he replied, leaving the empty box on the countertop and heading back to his room. My room. I stood there in the dark, cleaning up the crumbs he had left, realizing that this was my life now, cleaning up their messes in silence at 3 in the morning while he slept in my bed without the slightest concern for the consequences of his actions. On Friday morning, as I prepared breakfast according to my new official schedule, Renata came downstairs with an energy I hadn't seen in months. She was wearing a red dress I didn't recognize and shoes that cost more than my week's worth of groceries. "Mom, I need you to watch the kids all weekend," she announced, as she poured coffee into my favorite mug, the one with little painted flowers that my husband had given me on our 5th anniversary. "Gustavo and I are going on a couples retreat at the downtown hotel. We need to reconnect after all this stress." "A couples retreat?" I repeated, unable to hide my surprise. "And with what money?" "Oh, Mom, always thinking about money," she replied with that artificial laugh she had perfected. "Gustavo got a bonus at work. We deserve a break after everything we've been through." A bonus. Gustavo, who worked 3 hours a day from home, had received a bonus. But somehow that money wasn't enough to buy cereal or contribute to household expenses. It was only enough for luxury hotels and romantic retreats. "And the kids will be okay with me all weekend?" I asked, though I already knew my opinion didn't matter. "Of course they will. You're their grandma. It's natural for you to take care of them. Besides, according to your new schedule, weekends are designated for activities with them," she said, checking her phone as she spoke. It was true. In my servitude schedule, weekends were marked as intensive childcare and deep house cleaning time. Apparently, my rest didn't exist in their concept of family organization. "Renata, we need to talk," I said, feeling something break inside me. "This can't go on." She looked up from her phone with an expression of genuine surprise, as if she couldn't understand why I was protesting against my obviously reasonable fate. "Talk about what, Mom? Your negative attitude lately? Because yes, I've noticed you're very grumpy. Maybe you should see a doctor at your age. It's normal to have hormonal changes that affect your mood." Hormonal changes. My indignation at the abuse was a medical problem I needed to solve. My resistance to humiliation was a symptom of my advanced age that required professional treatment. "I'm not sick, Renata. I'm tired of being treated like an employee in my own home," I said, surprising myself with my own clarity. "Employee," she repeated, putting on an offended expression that would have won an Oscar. "Mom, how can you say that? Your family. What happens is that in a family, each person has responsibilities. Ours are to work and generate income. Yours is to keep the house running. It's that simple." "And why do my responsibilities include paying all the expenses and working 24 hours a day?" I asked, feeling my voice tremble but grow stronger. "Mom, no one asked you to work 24 hours. The schedule we gave you is very reasonable. You have free time between activities. You can rest, watch television, do whatever you want in your free time." I looked at the schedule taped to the refrigerator. The free time it mentioned were 30-minute intervals between tasks, enough to go to the bathroom or get a glass of water, but not enough to truly rest. "And the money? Why do I have to pay for everything if you have income?" I insisted. "Because we are saving for our future, Mom. We can't be spending our money on current expenses when we have long-term goals. You've already lived your life. You've had your opportunity to save and plan. Now it's our turn." The logic was devastating in its cruelty. According to their reasoning, I had already had my chance to live, and now my role was to finance and facilitate their opportunities. My pension, earned with 40 years of work, was less important than their long-term goals. Gustavo appeared in the kitchen, already dressed to leave, with a smile that I found increasingly repulsive. He approached Renata and kissed her on the cheek, a gesture of possession and complicity that completely excluded me. "All set for the weekend?" he asked her, completely ignoring me, though I was standing less than 3 feet away. "Yes, my love. I've explained everything to Mom. She'll take care of the kids and the house," Renata replied, as if I were just another object she had arranged for their absence. "Perfect, honey. Just one more thing," Gustavo said, finally addressing me. "On Monday, my mother is coming to visit us for a few days. She'll need the guest room, so it would be good if you have it spotless. She also likes breakfast very early, around 6 in the morning. I hope it's not a problem." His mother. Another person I would have to attend to, feed, and serve in my own home. Another mouth to feed with my money. Another person who would expect my services as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "And how long is she staying?" I asked, though I already sensed I wouldn't like the answer. "We don't know exactly. It depends on how she feels. Lately, she's been very lonely since my father died, so we thought being with family would do her good," he replied, as if my house were a free hotel for people in need of company. "Gustavo, your mother and I don't get along very well," I said, remembering the few times I had met her and her dismissive attitude towards me. "Oh, honey, those are past problems. You have to learn to forgive and forget. Besides, she's an elderly lady. She needs care and attention. I'm sure that when you get to know her better, you'll get along very well." Care and attention that, of course, I would provide without remuneration or recognition, while Renata and Gustavo enjoyed their romantic retreat. I would be serving breakfast at 6 in the morning to a woman who considered me inferior. "And Mom," Renata added, putting on the earrings that completed her outfit, "when your mother-in-law arrives, it would be good if you give her the master bedroom. We can sleep in the children's room for a few days. She needs to be comfortable." The master bedroom, which they had already taken from me, now they were going to give it to Gustavo's mother. I, in my own house, would occupy the smallest room while a complete stranger slept in my bed, used my furniture, and expected my services. The weekend became a nightmare that surpassed all my darkest expectations. Renata and Gustavo left on Friday at 2 in the afternoon after leaving me an additional list of instructions for childcare that included specific times for meals, educational activities, limited screen time, and strict sleep routines. "It's important that you maintain discipline, Mom," Renata had told me before getting into the taxi I had paid for to the downtown hotel. "Children need structure. If you spoil them this weekend, it will be very difficult for them to respect us again afterwards." Ethan and Valerie looked at me with expectation, waiting for me to fulfill the role of entertainer, cook, teacher, and babysitter, all at the same time. It wasn't their fault, of course. They were children adapting to a system where Grandma was the person who solved everything, while their parents enjoyed freedoms I had forgotten existed. On Saturday morning, as I prepared pancakes for breakfast according to the specific nutritional instructions Renata had left, Ethan spilled orange juice on the living room rug. It was a normal accident, the kind of thing that happens when there are children at home. But when I started cleaning, I realized there weren't enough cleaning products. "Grandma, Mom says that when something gets stained, you have to clean it immediately or it gets ruined forever," Valerie informed me, with the seriousness of a professional supervisor. She was right. Renata had been very specific about keeping the house spotless during their absence. So, at 9 in the morning on Saturday, I found myself walking to the supermarket with the 2 children, spending $30 of my pension on cleaning products for a disaster that could have been solved with soap and water. At the supermarket, Ethan asked for the special cereal his father ate, the one that cost $8 a box. Valerie wanted the organic cookies her mother bought her, the ones in the $10 package. I looked at the prices and made desperate mental calculations, knowing that every dollar I spent was a dollar less for my own needs. "Why are you taking so long to decide, Grandma?" Ethan asked impatiently while I compared prices of laundry detergent. "I'm just seeing which one is better, my love," I lied, not wanting to explain to an 8-year-old that his grandma had to choose between buying food for him or medicine for herself. When we got home, there was a message from Renata on my phone. "Mom, I hope you bought fresh vegetables for the week. When we get back on Sunday, we need the house to be perfect and the kitchen full. We don't want to arrive at an empty house after our relaxing trip. Fresh vegetables. Another $50 I hadn't budgeted for. Another 2 hours walking with the children because the taxi money would have to be used for food. Another afternoon of my weekend dedicated to serving the needs of people who were enjoying a luxury hotel with the money they had saved thanks to my free services." On Sunday afternoon, as I cleaned the house from top to bottom for Renata and Gustavo's triumphant arrival, I received a call that would change everything. It was Lucy, my neighbor of 15 years, the only person who truly knew my situation, although I had never openly spoken about it. "Honey, are you okay? You've seemed very strange lately," she said with that warm voice that reminded me what it was like to have a conversation without timers or to-do lists. "Yes, I'm fine," I lied automatically as I folded Gustavo's clothes that I had washed and ironed over the weekend. "No, you're not okay. I see you leaving very early every morning, as if you're rushing somewhere, and I see you coming home with supermarket bags almost every day. What's going on in your house?" she insisted with that gentle persistence that characterized true friends. For a moment, I was tempted to hang up. It was easier to keep pretending that everything was normal, that it was natural for a 66-year-old woman to live like a housekeeper in her own home. But something in Lucy's voice broke me. "Lucy, can you come over for a moment? I need to talk to someone," I said, surprising myself with my own honesty. "I'm on my way," she replied without asking questions. When Lucy arrived, the children were watching television in the living room, completely absorbed in their shows. We sat in the kitchen, surrounded by the perfect order I had created for their parents' arrival, and for the first time in months, I told someone the truth about my life. I showed her the schedule. I explained about the money. I told her about the threat of being kicked out of my own house if I didn't agree to be their free employee. I told her about the small room, about the family exclusion Sundays, about Gustavo's mother who would come to be served by me in my own bed. Lucy listened in silence with an expression that went from surprise to horror, and finally to the purest indignation I had seen in a long time. "Honey, this is abuse," she said finally with a clarity that hit me like a slap of reality.